Hi, I'm Michael. Welcome to Beyond the Screenplay. Today we are talking about Independence Day and probably some more of the worlds for reasons that will be made clear shortly. I am joined by part of the Lessons from the Screenplay team, writer Trisha Arand.
Good morning, everyone.
Editor Alex Calleros.
Hello.
And a very special guest, it's hard, I can't even say it. Video essayist and writer and the one and only Lindsay Ellis.
Thank you. I like to have my title be a challenge as a test.
So far, I've failed with both introductions of the guests.
Well, yeah, it's just like you can't say YouTuber anymore because then people think bad things. So
right.
You have to like give yourself a fancy title so people don't think you're like diet alt-right.
Right. So we're here to talk about Independence Day. So
the best movie.
The best movie.
The
ever.
best one.
Kind of, yeah.
Truly.
I'm here to defend Independence Day's honor.
I watched it last night and I enjoyed myself so much.
It's good.
Yeah.
I have it on 4K and like
is it out on 4K?
Yeah, it's out on 4K. Lord of the Rings is not, but Independence Day.
Right. Apple TV, I rented it and it was like 4K HDR and I was so happy.
Amazing.
Yeah. I have the like my 5.1 system set up, so it's like 4K 5.1, 10 out of 10. Would recommend.
God.
Jeff Goldblum.
Yes.
Jeff Goldblum, Will Smith, chemistry for the ages.
Yeah. Let's
Seriously.
peak Goldblum, really.
Yeah.
Like, oh, so good.
Yeah, I just like up on rewatch, like even after that video, like because Independence Day is the movie that I just never ever get sick of. Like it's the only one.
Yeah.
And it was just like suddenly shocking to me that Will Smith and Jeff Goldblum never made another movie again because their chemistry is so fantastic, and because like they meet 80% of the way through the movie.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
and
like
then
just the third act, basically.
Yeah, and then it's just like they've been together the whole movie, and it just feels so completely natural. And it's just that never happens. That should not be allowed.
Yeah, and an unexpected duo as well.
Right. Who would have predicted those two as having
That should not work. But
Roland Emmerich.
because that's why like I think Independence Day is unique among the Emmerich canon because it's the fact that it works in most of his movies don't really.
Yeah. Cool. Well, yeah. So Lindsay, your video that you just released as of the recording here in March was comparing Independence Day and War of the Worlds. If anyone doesn't know Lindsay Ellis, you have an amazing YouTube channel, Film Theory
It's
Analysis.
just my name.
It's called Lindsay Ellis.
Yeah,
It's easy to
called
find.
my name.
Highly
Sorry.
recommend some of the like best film theory analysis on YouTube.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really, really enjoyable. We're all big fans.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I really loved your Independence Day versus War of the Worlds video because first I'd forgotten about War of the Worlds, which was actually nice to have forgotten about it. But to remember it through the catharsis of like deconstructing what went wrong and all the problems it had was really, really interesting. And then also you talk about, the cultural context and how, an invasion narrative pre 9/11, post 9/11, all that stuff. So what was the like impetus? Why did you want to talk about these two movies?
Well, they're kind of two of my favorite movies. And actually, it's like that was a remake of a video I did like a long time ago, like before I even had a YouTube channel. I was on a platform called blip.tv because like technically my YouTube channel is fairly new because I only really started uploading to it in 2016. So basically everything I did before that is either offline or uploaded to a second channel. But like that video I did, that was, it felt like, I really liked it because I thought the pre 9/11 invasion narrative and the post 9/11 invasion narrative and that comparison I thought was really interesting, but like the video was just kind of really amateurish and had a lot of like fat and we need to like talk about Tom Cruise and how he cray and jumping on couches when that doesn't really have to anything, because I think that's the thing that I like as I've gotten older and streamlined the way I approach things. Like when I talk about a movie, I had to train myself out of trying to talk about every facet of the movie because there's a lot of angles you can talk about with Spielberg's War of the Worlds. And in this case, I wanted to talk about like the invasion narrative and its place in history, and specifically as an adaptation of H.G. Wells, who's, an interesting, a really interesting writer and a cool dude. And like the original War of the Worlds is like influential in a way that we really don't kind of give its due credit. Because even though it's like, well known, it's like it started an entire genre, like, and one that's still really popular, and I think that's really interesting. But in fact, and I also like I think like Alien First Contact things are like my favorite thing in narrative.
They're really fun.
Like like those two I think are just just sort of like the embodiment of the time, and I think the way invasion narratives play out in a culture in the time that they're released is really interesting.
For sure. I appreciated your dive into history right at the beginning of the video.
The Franco-Prussian Wars.
The Franco-Prussian War. Well, I love history so much. And I think that there's not enough of an appreciation, especially in all kinds of film discourse about the history, but obviously like sociopolitical context that movies are released in that I think we tend to separate our response to a movie from where it came from and like what it actually means to us in this time.
Yeah.
We like to act like we're just criticizing the acting or something, as though they don't all like meet together. And so a dive back into history and what invasion narratives historically have meant. And this, what you talk about in the video about like the absurdity is the point, right? Or sort of that's the attraction.
Like, I think that's part of why Independence Day feels almost comforting to come back to now. Because it is like you get to step back into that pre-9/11 world where we could just have movies like this. And it was just like, they
weren't loaded.
Yeah. Like Vivica A. Fox, in the tunnel of fire. And we're like, sure.
The dog.
Yeah,
just like,
I love it.
I'm going to go into this closet and this will be spared. Even though like you just saw like entire city blocks and everything in them destroyed.
Anything of like Harvey Firestein going, oh crap, and like how that is so like it's such a stark contrast to just like the horror in Spielberg's War of the Worlds. And I think like that War of the Worlds is interesting because like that's one thing I wish I had gone into more is like the sort of how Emmerich and Spielberg were like kind of like diss tracking each other with the two films, because like Emmerich definitely does it in Independence Day, like first with now that's what I call a close encounter and I'm gonna go whoop E.T.'s ass, like he's like almost kind of like egging Spielberg, like you look at your friendly aliens, my aliens are scary, and then and then Spielberg kind of like flips the narrative and be like, oh, like it's like Independence Day. No, it's not. Like, oh, say, and like my aliens are scary. And it's just like almost like a dick waving contest between these two directors over whose aliens are scarier, because Spielberg had planned on making More of the Worlds in the 90s. He was actually that was because he I think like in the 80s there was a point where he was like, I can't imagine. No, I don't think that's actually true, because E.T. originally was a much more sinister film. Like it was kind of, and then they kind of decided to split the two souls, or split the soul of the original E.T. into two films, which was E.T. and Poltergeist. And
interesting.
Yeah, thankfully.
Thank God.
I still find E.T. terrifying. But
really?
that's
Yeah,
just
it's
me.
interesting how people like. I did this when I was in high school. I was shocked that people would find E.T. terrifying, and I like did a survey of like all
in
my
high
class.
school.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Like because people, it was very like down the middle. People either were like E.T. is formative, and that's me. Like I'm just like because like when I was like 8, I didn't even know what a director was, but I knew I wanted to be Steven Spielberg because he directed Jurassic Park and E.T.
Right.
And,
Same.
Exactly. Same.
The other half are like, I find E.T. terrifying. Yeah, like I think that sort of urge of like the original idea, because like E.T. was supposed to be like the nice one, but his species was bad, and kind of more like Transformers if there were no Decepticons. Like I'm gonna help you out, friendly humans, and then they just made it what they will. I'm so happy because of E.T. is like such a good visual movie. Like it's very low on dialogue.
There's a look.
There's
a look happening here because there's a push from the writers and the LFTS team to do an ET episode.
I've been pitching an ET video to Michael for
Oh.
a while now, and
Girl.
Michael is in the I don't like ET camp.
Girl, get over it. It's good.
He'll have to look at a lot of ET.
I think E.T. is one of like I think it might be his best movie, and I think
Really?
like just
Agree.
purely on a like just the filmmaking is really really sophisticated, and in a way that I think kind of gets buried because it was such a huge deal when it came out, and it was like so associated with Michael Jackson and so like ubiquitous to the point of meaninglessness, like Ronald McDonald,
Right.
but like the filmmaking is really really like interesting and sophisticated, and like there's very little dialogue, and like trusts the audience to sort of impart like the way they use the camera to impart like the child's point of view and how that is the point of view of the entire film. So
Listen to Lindsay.
Yeah.
Well,
She
now
I
that
got a
Lindsay
lot
has
of-
spoken.
I got a lot of feelings on each.
I mean, I know what you mean, Michael, though. Like when I was a kid, like Jurassic Park was like the movie
Yeah.
that was like I want to make movies. E.T., I think whenever I first saw it, I did get pretty freaked out, especially in like deathbeddy, like clean room scenes.
Yeah.
To me, but that was just like too real and too like wrong. And, yeah, I don't know. So there were moments in it when, as a kid, like it didn't get me the same way Jurassic Park did, because there was something too like real about it.
Well, yeah, especially like if you've ever like had a relative get sick.
Yeah.
Right.
And like it is very real in that way.
Yeah.
But also, you know, I think it is kind of fairy tale-ish in the same way that WALL-E is.
Definitely.
Because it doesn't really, because I think that's the thing, like it would not work if Elliot was like 2 years older, you know, like with the E.T. heart bond, and you kind of have to be like the protagonist has to be below a certain age to not be like really like maybe we shouldn't be giving him these explosives, like, and you know, in the film he's like, don't worry about it, he knows what he's doing. He's just give him that chainsaw, he's got this. And then he did have this, it was great, it was fine.
And Spielberg was highly influential on Emmerich. Like, yeah, Emmerich's been very clear about that. And I think in German, they, like, after his first movie in Germany, because he's a German director, they called him, I do not know the German word for it, and I'm not going to try to say it, but essentially, like, German Little Spielberg. Was
Kleiner Spielberg.
Little Spielberg, I like it.
Which was meant to be derogatory, but it was because what he was doing was such a departure from what other German filmmakers were doing. It was very American.
Yeah, like especially like Stargate does feel very, because that was his first American film, and it does feel very Spielberg-y in that way. Because like the fact that his first two American films were alien movies. Yeah. And also conspiracy based, which I find very, he likes conspiracy theory.
He does.
But I think it's interesting because he doesn't believe them. Like, and I think that's like this interesting dichotomy you have, because then you have like the people who like make, you know, first contact fiction because they like, you know, I had an experience, you know? I was abducted, and
like
then
Randy Quaid.
But then you have people like Randy Quaid, who is his real life character. But and then you have people like Roland Emmerich who just like it as story fodder, like especially like Stargate with like the whole Illuminati and ancient aliens and pyramid stuff, and then you have like Independence Day, which is the government cover up, and then you have 2012, which is you know, the Mayan thing. And I guess Day After Tomorrow was kind of slotted in there.
But I guess
Anonymous, the Spielberg truther movie, or Shakespeare truther movie.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Right.
Yeah, Shakespeare didn't write
did
Shakespeare
Because
I think like I don't think he thinks about how harmful, like, I mean, like in the 90s, conspiracy theory was fun, right?
There was a movie called Conspiracy Theory.
It was just fun. It was harmless. It's cute. And now it's like, Alex Jones is gonna take down like the government, and like it's kind of scary.
Well, it's kind of like
anymore.
in the internet age, it's a very different beast because people live in their own truth pockets and have a self-perpetuating bubble they're in.
Like IMHO, the X-Files reboot did not work. It did. They did not know where to go with that.
I was afraid to even watch it because it.
I didn't watch all of it. Yeah.
It definitely did. But yeah, and I actually think like the X-Files. So this would have been kind of peak X-Files when Independence Day came out. And I feel like you can really see that clearly too.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's interesting when you kind of compare the two, where it's like Independence Day can't decide whether the deep state is bad or not.
Right.
Right.
Whereas like X-Files has a very clear point of view.
Exactly.
And then like Roland can't bring himself to like be mad at anyone.
No.
Like, did you notice that like in all of his films at the end of the day, or almost all of them, sometimes you'll have like a, you know, kind of curmudgeonly character who dies and deserves to die. But like for the most part, his films tend to be about like humanity coming together against the thing. And like even like the, you know, sniveling little weasel Secretary of Defense in Independence Day, like he gets to join in on the prayer circle.
Right. There's even redemption for him.
Yeah. And I feel like there's something deeply charming about that and very 90s and very out of place in our current filmscape.
Yeah.
I like what you said in your essay about Independence Day, which is 9/11 ruined everything.
Yeah.
Because it really did.
Yeah. Now we're so cynical now. Yeah. I think it also kind of laid the groundwork for the current nitpickscape of like film criticism, where filmmakers feel like they have to preemptively address, like potential plot holes rather than letting, because you could, it's like a movie like E.T. You could never, ever.
No.
I mean, you could make a movie like that, but people would be really annoying about it. Be like, E.T. explained, how did his civilization go faster than light? How were they able to get the signal from E.T. if they were already really far away and the E.T. signal's only going the speed of light? And yeah, I think there's just this cynicism now that you just did not see in the 90s.
Yeah. What's interesting, I don't want to talk about Star Wars, but I'm going to mention that
the Godwin of film discussion.
Yeah.
Doing my Last Jedi video, I feel like when I try to sometimes navigate all of it and acknowledge these are all the different corners and everyone, it's okay. I'm not you're heard, and I'm just going to try to, and just trying to navigate the insanity of the reaction to The Last Jedi and Star Wars and all of that. And someone even made it like a parody video of what would people's reactions be today if The Empire Strikes Back came out, and it was just kind of all the same things, and just really exemplified there's so much more harsh, nitpicky, like you're saying, criticism of films that I think sort of just ties into the whole social media personality of this cynical this gotcha economy thing of,
I think that's also it's really tiring to have to write around that as a film writer.
Right.
I with Bright, whenever I did that review, that was right after all the allegations against Max Landis came out. And I was I do not care, I don't want to have to address this. And because it wasn't relevant to the point I was making, so the way I just I'm fine, I'm just gonna pretend there is no screenwriter and be weird they were just no screenwriter. Nah. Yeah. Okay, cool. Whoops, bye. And I think the expectation that you need to have a take on everything it makes it really hard, because it's just generally exhausting to have to mind read hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, and try to tiptoe around their expectations.
Right.
Yeah.
And one thing we sort of just mentioned the favorite. We mentioned The Favorite in a recent episode. And speaking of just explaining things, I love that movie explains nothing when it launches you into it. Not so much as a title card giving you the year, not so much as anything. Who are these people? We don't know. It drops you right into the middle of this world and trusts that you're able to figure it out. And I feel that is the kind of filmmaking.
Yeah, it's becoming increasingly rare.
Oh, it is. And I love it.
Which is weird because when it
well.
Yeah, when it works well, people freak out. Mad Max Fury Road is, a new classic, and it absolutely does that. And it's odd considering how well that movie did that it's still kind of a vanishing rarity to have films that trust their audience to be able to pick up on, film language, context clues,
Right.
The little things.
Right.
Right.
Thinking about Independence Day and sort of how it existed in the 90s, one of the things I was thinking about while watching your videos, you point out that Independence Day is kind of like a cartoon, and just its tone and how it treats things. And even when people are dying, they get little quips of jokes before they explode into flames.
Yeah.
And it's very safe. It's it's fun that everyone's dying. It's okay.
But also it's there's absolutely no horror in watching these major cities get destroyed.
Right.
It's
awesome.
fun.
Right.
Fuck you, LA.
I will say actually though that when I first saw it in theaters and just having that experience of that initial annihilation scene, it is pretty hardcore, and the music cuts out, and there is just several shots in a row of just fireball destroying
it goes
things.
A solid 3 or 4 minutes with no score.
It's pretty heavy, and it's awesome and fun, but I also don't see that very much anymore either. War of the Worlds was a specific example with Spielberg trying to do that almost terrorism horror.
Well, I think part of it is that it's overdone, and you're not really allowed to be that thoughtless anymore. I think that's sort of the problem with Independence Day, and I think also Armageddon, where you have the meteoroids going through the Empire State Building, and we now know that's not what it looks like when a building collapses of that size.
And when that happens, people are dying on the inside.
Right.
Yeah. And that too, and now the the aesthetic of destruction looks different. It looks, there's all the ash now, and I think another example of a similar to Independence Day would be Man of Steel, where
Right.
but the problem there, of course, is that because we now know what mass destruction looks like, they use that really 9/11-y imagery, but kind of thoughtlessly. And it was like, you could do that in the 90s.
Yeah.
But if you do it now, you're kind of making a statement. And then Man of Steel, the statement was what exactly?
Exactly.
And especially considering the tone of that movie was more similar to War of the Worlds than it was to Independence Day. But then because and then of course there was the pushback and people didn't this is kind of I guess gauche. And so then they, with Batman v Superman tried to make it look like it was deliberate. And
Right.
woof.
We're still gonna destroy everything, but it's been evacuated now.
Yeah, it's fine.
Well, and
Yeah.
Avengers did that too, right?
Yeah,
Age of
they have
Ultron
that whole
begins with
storyline of-
the montage of people are mad because you lifted up this whole city and dropped it.
Mhm. Well, and what I think is interesting is that as I was watching your video and thinking about this, that it's kind of affects the narratives themselves that can be told. And I think, Alex, you were mentioning this of how well it handles all these characters and
the cast of thousands.
right, yeah. And I feel like there's a certain I don't know how that could be handled today. I think that it's sort of this cartoony, lighter thing lets us dip in for a little bit and have a kind of, all right, this is a fun moment with this character. And it doesn't have to feel real or serious in the same way that.
Well, because I was watching it last night and I was so surprised at how fluid the first half of the movie feels up until that initial attack scene. Just to juggle that many characters and to feel whenever you jump to a certain character, whether in LA or New York, it's kind of the right time to be in that city for the bigger plot point happening, and you're accomplishing the character development and you're accomplishing this, and it never feels oh, now we have to be here for a minute to meet this character. It's just part of the story.
Yeah, because if you watch the director's cut, it is bad. It is unbearable. The first act is 30% longer, and it's mostly the Randy Quaid subplot.
Oh,
and
good.
I remember this from a long time ago when they first released it. There's a lot more Randy Quaid.
And it just that kind of makes sense, but it's just he's the kid has some sort of autoimmune disorder. We need to get his medication, and that they spend a lot more time with it. And I think, thank God they kind of figured wait, this is the worst subplot. We need less of it, because the only point with Randy Quaid is that he kamikazes at the end. That's the only reason we need him here. But there was a lot more setup, and I think it is really the power of editing that they
absolutely
is the director's cut is I wouldn't say it's unwatchable, but it is not good. And that they figured out what to keep in and what works. I think Roland Emmerich is honestly kind of underrated as a director.
I agree,
because you remember
really
his
impressed watching it again.
Yeah,
I really was.
And people remember his movies because you look at his sort of knockoffs, people his co-producer Dean Devlin, who directed Geostorm. And I don't remember, I saw that in theaters and I don't remember a single frame of that movie. But you remember Roland Emmerich's movies. They're extremely cartoony. He loves dealing in stereotypes, but I think of Day After Tomorrow, where you have the guy from Showgirls, everybody got AIDS and shit. He plays a homeless man who gets to know the rich boy from the Upper East Side because climate change has taken everything away from both of us. And the homeless guy's let me show you how to insulate using newspaper. And
that's right.
Yeah, and the
I
rich
just
boy.
remember the wolves and the running away from the frost.
Yeah. So you remember that?
No, that was not a good movie, but I loved that movie. I watched
President Dick Cheney's
a lot.
thanks,
You did?
Mexico. Thanks, Mexico, for letting us be the refugees.
Right.
Yes, I like that.
That is something that works. This sort of lean into some stereotypes or shorthand essentially for a character really works in Independence Day because the cast is so large.
Yeah.
Because you absolutely can't develop the characters any farther. There are too many of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really respect that about Independence Day. Actually, it was a very deliberate choice. And if you look at disaster movies from the 70s, which is sort of the big heyday of disaster movies, a movie like Airplane has disaster movies in the 70s. It was so interesting. So Michael did a video about Independence Day, and he points out that there are so many characters in it. And then like in your video, you have this graphic of all of the like people's
27 people.
headshots lined up, and then you put X's over like who makes it and who like doesn't, as though it's like a bingo card. Like that was how disaster movie posters looked in the 70s.
Like the Towering Inferno.
Exactly.
And
They had all these characters, which enables you to do two things. It enables you to have a ton of different perspectives on the disaster. So you can cut around and like really explore how it's affecting different people's lives. And it also saves you from having to do any heavy character lifting, like emotional development.
Like, this is our like woman scorned. This is our scientist. This is our kid. Like this is our precocious child. Yeah, it's just like you kind of instantly know who that is. And like, or like in Independence Day, this is our stripper with a heart of gold.
Exactly.
Or, although, because like, can I also just say, Independence Day passes the Bechdel-Wallace test.
Yes, it does.
And also has a great part for a woman of color in the form of Vivica A. Fox, who, you know, putts around LA saving lives and finds the first lady, and then then there's that moment of like interclass like understanding where, oh, you dance ballet? Like, no, I'm a stripper. Like, oh, well, I guess I respect that.
Sorry.
In strong contrast to War of the Worlds, where there are three characters, and then you're expected to do all of this like emotional labor with them working their way through all of their stuff to the movie's detriment.
Well, which is why it's so disappointing when the movie doesn't pay off any of that. I mean, that's what you nailed so well in your video essay about War of the Worlds, was that just weird sinking feeling that I felt as the movie was getting to the
Robbie, come back!
Boy.
I just like what like
Robbie, we got to pay off this subplot, Robbie.
It was just really strange because the movie is so strong in the beginning, and like, how did this happen? I don't know.
Yeah, like as we were rewatching it, my co-writer, who had not seen it since 2005, she was like, through the first half, she was like, I genuinely did not remember how good this was. I'm kind of confused, and like, because I to my memory, this movie is really mediocre, and then it starts to dissolve in the second half, and she's like, oh, that's why, because people, like a really good first half doesn't really mean anything if you leave the theater feeling dissatisfied. And the thing with War of the Worlds, like you mentioned, is it is fundamentally a character study.
Yeah.
Like we don't, like, the aliens don't really matter. We never know what their deal is, which I do like, but like it is a huge contrast to Independence Day, which is definitely not a character study, and it is just very fundamentally about like, okay, how do we unite to solve the problem, and as opposed to War of the Worlds, which is a survival narrative, like in the vein of Hunger Games, which is fine, but it definitely needs a payoff, or else why bother making it a character study?
Right.
And as you point out, the big problem, I think, is with, all of the characters really don't have any sort of satisfying arc, but especially Robbie, and then also Dakota
Rachel,
Fanning's, Dakota Fanning's character, Rachel, is like, they actually set her up to be really interesting.
Yeah.
And then they do nothing with her.
I wonder if it was like that was deliberate. Like, no, we don't want to make it the cliche of the strong, independent, precocious child, and it's just like, but why not? Like, she's 10. 10-year-olds can defend themselves,
and that's very Spielbergian, and that's one thing he does really well, is tell narratives about children that are assertive and mature.
Yeah,
and
you'd contrast that with like Jurassic Park, where he does trust the children to be able, like, she knows how to use a computer in the way that the adults don't, because like he kind of understands that she is of this up and coming generation that is trained on technology, even though it's 1992.
And it's also not a Unix system.
I know this.
Can we just have a moment for Jurassic Park? I think we all love it equally.
So much.
Just like a moment of silence. And anyway, War of the Worlds is disappointing. But I think part of that was because like Spielberg did say about Close Encounters, that he eventually kind of went on to regret the way he, maybe not regret, but basically say, like, if I made that now being like 2005, I would not have it have the ending it did, because it's basically about a man abandoning his family
Yep.
Yeah.
and it being totes cool because he's abandoning it for something pretty sweet. And that sort of Ray was intended to be something of a refutation of this idea, like in the face of like a threat that this father needs to step up. But the problem is like, and another thing about War of the Worlds, which a lot of people it tends to get lost in the discussion, is that it was made very, very quickly. Like,
Right, I remember that.
yeah.
I'm wondering.
The
Yeah, it feels
screenplay,
like that.
the screenplay had been kind of tossed around for a while, but I don't think they really gave themselves the time to fix it on a screenplay level, because the film was shot in like this 2-month period that Spielberg and Cruise kind of both had like some availability. So, and that was like November, December of 2004, and the film was released in like July of 2005. So
Right.
it was like
Pretty fast turnaround.
I remember
made
it was
really,
like an
really quickly.
insanely fast production for the scale. Like it
Mhm.
was unheard of, kind of.
Wow.
Yeah, because they
Yeah.
shot that the Bayonne Bridge blowing up scene like 2 or maybe a month before it was supposed to air that Super Bowl spot, and that effect shot pretty much only exists because of the Super Bowl spot.
That's funny.
It's almost as though when you rush through making movies, something gets lost in the process.
Yeah, and it's a shame too, because there's so many great practical effects in the first half of that movie.
Yeah.
Well, and going back to what you guys were saying about, you know, the child character, you know, you had Dakota Fanning. Like,
Yeah.
she's so good. Like, I remember watching that and being like, this child is like the best actress I've ever seen. Like, she's so great. And like the long take with them in the car moving in and out. Like, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
it has so much going for it. And so it's so,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much disappointment when it peters out.
Yeah,
Well, and for a Spielberg movie, because usually
Yeah.
he does treat kids with such respect and give them such meaty roles. And yeah, for both the children's stories to peter out the way they do is very strange for a Spielberg movie, actually.
I was joking on Twitter, like I wanted someone to write like a fanfic of Rachel like befriending one of the tripods, like one of the surviving tripods, and someone
E.T.
did,
style.
Yes.
and it was great. I was like, I should have responded, because they like sent me like, hey, you know, I was bored, so I did it, and I was like, I should have, yeah. It was on AO3. It was like, yes, someone did it. Thank you for giving Rachel something to do.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the aliens, I loved the way in your video you kept showing that one shot of them like hitting the bicycle wheel. It's
And
just
people
like-
were like, "That's an homage to H.G. Wells." I know, it's still goofy.
Yeah, and just like they're just the Independence Day aliens inside of the suits.
Yeah.
and just
They're-
how weird of a letdown that
Like,
is.
oh,
Yeah.
I think of like the Mystery Science Theater quote, like, "It's a cutosaurus."
Yeah.
It is, you know, such a letdown. I
The
think it's
little mouths.
but it's
yeah.
also it's interesting because you see creature design, and that was one thing I kind of like toned down in this revised essay on these two films, is because I kind of split that off. I did a video a couple 2 or 3 years ago about creature design, specifically with aliens, and why aliens all tend to look kind of samey.
Mhm.
When in, you know, theory, you could do anything, right? But that is also, again, a form of shorthand, because for whatever reason, we as a species have more or less agreed on what, you know, like, right? So you got these big eyes and a big head and either gray or splotchy green skin and like always big eyes. And so it's like, you know, there are these interesting signifiers with like, the big eyes kind of denote like mystery and also intelligence. Same with like the big head.
Mhm.
And then like the small
Mhm.
stature kind of has to like impart some vulnerability.
Mhm.
And so whenever there's like a deviation from that, I find it really interesting, like Arrival
Yeah.
and District 9. And you know, because the thing is, like, the way you design your creature is another way to impart information to the audience. The
Right.
longer the audience has to kind of get used to it and kind of incorporate it into their mental universe. So
Right.
it makes sense. The Spielberg made his aliens look really basic, and the only non-basic thing about them was that they are 3-limbed instead of 2, which no one really noticed because the scene's so dark anyway.
Right,
You
right,
can't
right.
really see it. But it's like, it's just we didn't need it. We could have just stick with the tripods. I love the design of the tripods.
Right, which is much more horrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite creature designs ever. Is the tripod.
I agree. And one thing about Independence Day, I think that really works about the creature design is those like biomechanical suits
Mhm.
that they put them in,
Mhm.
because that is something that we don't automatically think of. You know, it's like
naked
why
alien.
would they? Yeah.
Why are they always naked?
Obviously, aliens would always be naked in our brains
Duh.
because we're the only
aliens
species
don't
that
wear clothes.
Right.
What are they going to wear? Like a jacket?
So it's a really cool idea that would be, of course, a part of their technology.
Well, do you know the story behind that?
I know that they wanted to prevent it from looking like a man in a suit, essentially.
Well, it was basically two designs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
cool.
because basically the designer came to Roland with this much more kind of conventional Roswell alien-looking guy, and this other one that was kind of much more inspired by like the Geiger xenomorph. And
Right.
Roland loved them both so much, he's like, let's use both. And one will be the biomechanical suit, which holds the other one, which also solves that logic question of why are they naked?
Yeah.
Well, and I think it makes for a really fun twist on the autopsy scene. You know?
Yeah.
Where it's like, I loved how that movie just does all the alien things.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
have
yeah.
Area 51. We have literally an alien autopsy.
It has,
Yeah.
the fact that it has, like, just, it's so gleeful with it. And it's so not
Yes.
cynical.
Yes.
Because I feel like the thing about, like, tropes like that is they tend to, like, especially now, be like, winky, winky, look at the camera and be like, we know how cliche this is, you know? But, like, in that one, it's just, like, played dead straight.
Uh-huh.
And that's...
just owns it.
Yeah, part of
Yeah.
the joy in it, and the fact that like the film itself kind of takes it really seriously, even though like the characters like Dr. Okund is this eccentric
Brent Spiner.
yeah,
Yeah.
Brent Spiner living his
Data.
best life,
Yes.
Totally.
He just was having so much fun.
yeah.
Yeah.
Even in the sequel, like like.
It makes no sense
Yeah,
that
no,
he's in
yeah.
the sequel.
Yeah,
That
he's
still
like
really
the
bothers
main
me.
character. in the
Yeah.
There's
sequel.
definitely a beat establishing he's definitely dead.
Right.
Yeah. No, he's fine. But he's just in a coma. He's fine.
But the design of the movie, I think, also really makes all of that effective. Like the design of the Area 51, like underground sets are super cool. And all of the like models that they built, I think, we are used to seeing absolutely everything CGI right now. And so the fact that like when you see those scenes with the alien like craft flying everywhere, it's like
Yeah.
all models.
It
it's
really
all,
holds
like, practical
up.
effects.
Yeah,
I was
yeah, yeah.
surprised by-
design for
It's
it.
pretty amazing how well like most of the effects held up for me watching it.
Yeah.
Some of them you could tell,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
a
Well,
lot of them
especially
were good.
the destruction scenes, like
Exactly.
the miniatures. Like, honestly, it looks so much better than the stuff you see now.
Yeah.
Like,
The kind of gooey buildings.
yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
the shiny, like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, yeah, when they blew all that up, it was like they built a 12-foot model of the White House or whatever, and then they filled it
Blew
full
it
of
up.
explosive charges and blew it up, and
Yeah.
that's how it looks, and it's awesome.
Well, one of my favorite shots during the destruction scene is like the guy who was like filing things in the
Yeah,
building in,
in the building,
in
right.
downtown
Building,
LA.
building.
He's like, "Ooh, I gotta get this filing done real quick." like priorities, buddy.
Like the president said to evacuate.
Yeah.
But you're
Well, I mean, also
filing.
Vivica A. Fox's character, like,
Sure, yeah.
okay, so Will Smith and Jasmine live in Glendale.
Yep.
I know this because I was like, someone find this, and then like someone on Twitter found it. It was
The
like,
street?
yeah, the
That's
street. Where it's
awesome.
like,
Oh my
where
God.
in LA are you like on a mountain that you can see downtown LA?
Mhm.
Right.
That it's far enough away that there's like
I
a
love that they live in Glendale.
yeah.
That makes
so
me so
they live in
happy.
Glendale. She works downtown at a, and as you know, downtown they don't do full nude. They only do topless. But only at a 5 foot distance from the patrons. So
Mhm.
she goes downtown and says, "I just came to get my paycheck and I got talked into working."
that was the thing that really struck me watching it again. Was like, wait, you really thought it was an okay night to work? The
Yeah.
night when Will Smith is like, leave and come visit me on the base to be safe.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll get one more shift in.
Yeah, I just get a quick shift in so I can get some spending cash, get some change for the road. Because like El Toro is not far away. It's in Orange County, so
Yeah.
it's like it wasn't like a journey into the Mojave. It was like an hour with traffic. And
Just one thing that you were saying that reminds me of it is like the scale. You were talking about the scale of the spacecraft in
Mhm. In the video.
Independence Day
Mhm.
and how amazing it is that you have these 15-mile wide
Mhm.
things that fill the entire sky that like help to incredibly raise the stakes, just make you full of awe and terror.
MovieNitpicks.com
And
is
the way they're
like,
shot. That's what you point out in the
there's no
video.
way a thing with that mass could ever stay that far above.
Yeah.
I feel like the way they're introduced, or even like the biomechanical suits, like I feel like all the parts that are, kind of goofy if you think about them too much, the build up to them and the filmmaking is so like fun, and it's very ominous, and it's slow, and it takes the time so that by the time it happens, you're like all about it.
Yeah.
And I really like that about.
I really miss that, because I feel like you're seeing fewer and fewer movies that like are kind of really out there premises but don't own it. I think that's like, because I think most of the decisions I've made in my adult life are more or less a direct result of my frustration with Michael Bay's Transformers films. Because I
Talk
think
more about that.
Transformers is one of those movies that is just so ashamed of its own conceit,
Right.
and it can't get over it, and it's just like negging itself, and it only gets worse as the movies go, and it's sort of like the anti-Independence Day in that way, which is ironic because it steals so much from Independence Day in a way that is not there in like Transformers lore before the movies came out. Like there was no Megatron under the Hoover Dam, there was no Sector 7, there was no like secret like we got all our technology from the Transformers. Like that was all completely ripped from Independence Day. Michael Bay. Well, it wasn't Michael Bay. It was Bob Orkey, who is a weird truther. Like, he's a weird 9/11 truther. So I think he's one of those guys that writes conspiracy theories because he believes it. But because I mean, like, as fascinated and in a weird way fond as I am of the Transformers movies, they're also like the very embodiment of that problem of how we can't because people like that's why people liked Thor Ragnarok so much, is it is absurd, but it leans into it, and it's never ashamed of its own absurdity. It just has fun with it.
And I feel like that is another kind of that remnant of like the 9/11 cynicalness of like our Batman got super dark, like you point out in the video, and like it seems like if something isn't cynical, like it has to be apologizing for the fact that it's like happy
Gleeful,
or like just simple and straightforward,
or if not even gleeful, believes in its own logic and doesn't feel the need to step outside of itself. Because the reason I do so much stuff with Transformers is because I really like Transformers, the franchise, and I think like it's really disappointing to see those movies made by, because I'm like, oh, thank God Bumblebee happened, and it's just kind of a shame that people didn't really see it, because like Bumblebee as a movie was just happy to be here, and like is never like, there's no cynical bone or robot piece in its body. It's just like, it's kind of the anti-Bay in that way, is it's just, there's no cynicism at all, and it's just like such a relief after just like 5 movies of pure hate and contempt for their audience, like, and I think we're finally rounding that corner. It took us almost 20 years.
Like we've been here longer than I expected.
Like movies like Thor that did really well, and
Spider-Verse.
Spider-Verse.
Pure fun.
And
so good.
Yeah, Bumblebee, like that we can finally like allow ourselves to have movies that are do require a lot of suspension of disbelief, but you trust your audience to go along with it without having to lean into that cynicism that has just been the background noise of filmmaking for so long.
Yeah. I think a big part of it in Independence Day that makes it work is Will Smith. Like, honestly, like, because a lot of the like most on the nose kind of just I don't know, hilarity, slapsticky, like those quips and things. They're all Will
punches
Smith.
That alien in the head,
the face,
without a
and
pause.
he was such a like personal hero of mine after this movie, where I was like, I want to be Will Smith. Like he's so cool.
I think he was my first crush.
Well, when he's got the tank top in the desert, dragging the alien.
Right.
Oh no, honestly,
like
it was Men in Black, which is another thing that infected my brain forever. Like,
that one came with the song. Because that was the other reason he was my hero.
He was so cool.
It's because like
also the song,
right? Means I will knock yo punk ass down.
But like in his rap, he was also like clean and just like, we're just here to have fun. Like it's not gangster rap. Like we're not gonna swear. Like fun, happy. And I was like,
straight edge young Michael.
Straight edge Michael.
Because he had to
on board with
he had to get out of rap while that was the case. And then late 90s happened. He's like, I can finally I can
Wild
be me
Wild
again.
West.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's like he had a thing on his YouTube channel about why he turned down The Matrix.
I saw something about that.
Yeah, he was just like, and then I made Wild Wild West. Not proud of it, but it happened.
He acknowledges that in one of the verses on Willennium, which is the follow-up to Big Willie's Bell. I'm sure everyone knows his discography as well as I do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I did an episode on Will Smith's rap career a few years ago.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
Oh, I need to watch that.
Yeah, it's not online right now. I think I need to put it up on my second channel. I'm just really lazy. But yeah, I think Will Smith is that movie would not have.
No.
I mean, who was? I think it was like Val Kilmer or something was the studio's first choice.
They didn't want Will Smith.
Well, yeah, they wanted a white guy.
Yeah.
It is, pretty remarkable that he has such a big role in.
Well, because he really had only done Fresh Prince, basically.
Yeah.
And Roland said that, like, and I do believe Roland because he said he had to fight to fight the studio to get Black man as effectively the main protagonist, and that was like a battle that he had to wage because like there was no real like names. Like Jeff Goldblum is the biggest name in the movie, and so it was like you could get away with it being an up and comer. That's great. Then we don't have to pay him as much.
Right.
But like that, I believe him that it was a battle because like that was back when I don't know who was the guy who was the guy in 1996. Val Kilmer.
Yeah, somebody like that.
God, can you imagine
No one.
Val Kilmer and Jeff Goldblum?
Oh,
that would
Whoa.
not have been
Yeah.
nearly as fun.
Well, because like when the studio sees this part, they're thinking like it's gonna be like some square jawed, like straight edge,
Yeah.
not
Boring.
like joyless. Because like that's the thing that really
Exactly.
makes the movie work is because he's like making jokes all the time. He's like Bugs Bunny and like
Basically, yeah.
like just like literally his best friends just died and he's like flying his jet through the Grand Canyon,
Yeah.
which is another thing where I'm like, okay.
Wait, how did they get there?
Yeah, so it's like one of those things where I'm like, so I'm movie nitpicks.comming where I was like, so let's ignore the fact that he's being chased the whole 500 miles from downtown LA to the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
Could he make it? And the answer is yes. Those jets do have enough fuel to.
How long would it take? Do you know?
Probably
it's only like an
about
hour
half
and a
an
half.
hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jets are fast.
Yeah. I think it'd probably take him about half an hour. So just half an hour, like bobbing and weaving, like with the green shit being shot.
Yeah.
But he also flew over Area 51 in Nevada before he was shot down.
It's kind of in the I mean, it's just like because like Area 51.
Oh, right, because you're kind of like going over Nevada first.
Not that I know. Not that I would know, but it wouldn't be like that out of the way because Area 51 is quite large and is kind of on the way to Vegas. like if you just kind of like do a slight northern detour. It's like a full because like most of Nevada is owned by the government. Fun fact.
Yeah.
So it's just like
Blow up nuclear bombs
Area
there.
That's what we
51
do in Nevada.
That was also why the U.S. government, because like it's kind of like a false assumption that because as you know, the Department of Defense does a lot of subsidies for a lot of movies. Captain Marvel being the most recent.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, big. That was a biggie. Man of Steel was another biggie. Independence Day got shot down because the government did not like the Area 51 stuff. They were like,
Makes
take
sense.
that out or you make it a fake. And Roland was like, I will not. Or no, I will not. And so that was, I mean, it's fine. I think like the problem with movies that accept DOD money is you can kind of tell.
Yeah.
There's always like this sort of propagandistic flavor to them. And
Michael Bay.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
exactly.
Like,
pretty
exactly.
blatant in the
so
Michael Bay
in your
movies.
face. Like,
Oh,
here's the
God.
slow-mo shot of the soldiers walking out of the smoke with the American flag.
The sun behind it.
And there's this dissonance there, which I guess you see with a lot of certain sects of the America, but where this idea of like soldier good, government bad, and Transformers is another one of those movies that can't decide if the deep state is bad or not.
Right.
Where you have Sector 7 and you kind of have this lovable buffoon in the form of John Turturro's character, Agent Simmons, and like that he teams up with the Secretary of Defense at the end and Anthony Anderson, and they're like holed up in the Hoover Dam and like fighting the tiny robot, like, and that's the end of their storyline. It's like, well, I guess we're friends now, even though John Turturro totally sexually assaulted Megan Fox. But yeah, okay.
Those are the weirdest movies.
bit.
Like, what is it? The second one where he's at the pyramids, and it's a bunch of like ball jokes
beneath the enemy's scrotum.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's going to be the sequel to The Whole Plate. If you don't watch it, I have a series dedicated to film theory using only the Transformers movies. It's called The Whole Plate.
Well, so really quick, I'm curious to kind of hear about your process. So yeah, how do you decide what you want to talk about when you're analyzing films? What is your methodology? Are you looking for something specific? Are you just taking it in?
Yeah, I have a co-writer, and we spitball a lot, I guess, because I'll usually, she's on maternity leave right now, but what we will do is kind of have like a weekly meeting and run through ideas, because it'll usually take us like between 6 weeks and several months to actually develop something. And usually we'll kind of figure out like, well, here is a thing and here is a take. And it's in the ecosystem of hot takes, it's kind of hard to find an angle that hasn't been done to death, which is why I will never ever ever talk about Star Wars again. But it was for instance, like, people kept asking me to do The Hobbit, and I was, for the longest time, I didn't want to touch it because I was just like, well, what's like, because like Sage Hayden, who does Just Right with a W, he like did a really, to my mind, pretty cohesive takedown of The Hobbit, like right after the third one came out, and I was like, I don't really have anything to add to that. And then when I started doing research, I found that like Warner Brothers changed the law of New Zealand to its benefit in a way that is still affecting the film industry, and it like blew my mind that that was not common knowledge, like even among entertainment journalists. So like that, exploring that angle and kind of growing out from there was where we started with that. And it tends, like, I guess it's always different. Like sometimes it'll be like based on a book, like with the thing we did about road shows and musicals, or sometimes it'll be like, I just watched How to Cake It Too Much while high, and like, when you're high, you start to like the facade starts to drop, and you're just like, she's just, they scripted this. She doesn't really care. She doesn't think this is funny. That's a pretend laugh. And so like from there, I started to like devolve into all this like research about like emotional labor and stuff like that. So I don't know. It really depends. It's always different. Because like Bright was the episode we did about Bright was the quickest one I have done in a very long time. We did that in about 2 weeks, start to finish. Wow. Because I hated it so much. Yep. It was just
it's a good motivator.
Dragon energy of hate, but generally it'll take, I'd say on average 6 to 8 weeks, but sometimes longer.
And so how much of that is the research? How much time do you spend on the actual script? Do you do multiple revisions of that?
Most of it is research, yeah. Like the Death of the Author one, I would say, was the one that got like torn down and started over the most. Because I generally, we have like a 2-week edit. Depending, that one was longer. The Manufacturing and Authenticity was the longest that I've done, and that was like 3 or 4 weeks in editing, because it, like putting the sections together.
I mean, that was a really impressive editing job. I mean, I'm an editor day job, and I just love the way you cut together the cake it, all the different cake. Yeah. It was doing the thing. It made me feel high, like the weirdness of seeing all those things back to back to back. It was very effective.
Yeah, it was. The hard one with that was doing them in sections and figuring out how to order the sections in a way that made sense, because like we were using nested files and which is something I don't normally do. Not nested files, nested sequences in Premiere. Yeah, the Death of the Author one, because we originally came in with the take that Death of the Author is bad and stupid and no one should adhere to it. And eventually we kind of became a little more centristy with just this idea that like is a pure theory. It's not very useful, but it can be a useful approach in a certain way, which is a little wishy-washy, but that's kind of like where it ended up. So because I think the thing about research is like we'll come in with like an idea of what we think it's going to be, but a lot of times it will change. Like even with War of the Worlds was just doing the research on invasion invasion literature from the 1870s was new information to me. I did not know that alien invasion narratives really only exist because Britain was afraid of Germany in the 1870s, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah. And so once you have all the research, like, do you do lots of feedback with the drafts of your script? Is it sort of just you and your co-writer?
It's like me and my co-writer, and it's generally just a living document where it's just like we're just in a constant state of like futzing with it. Yeah, it's just I guess it's pretty active. I'd say it's like at this point it's generally pure 50-50. Sometimes she does head writing. Like Hunchback of Notre Dame was the first one that she was a head writer on because she's an art history major, so that was something she'd been thinking about a lot.
Yeah. And because I'm a nerd, what app do you write in?
Google Docs.
Cool.
You may have heard of it. Google has.
It's still the best one, I think, for collaborative writing because it's so real time and it's just so easy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just not really beautiful to look at, but it's just so easy.
Is it? Well, I mean, because I was seeing in a mutual Slack the other day that people actually like put time codes in their scripts for what they want the clip to be, and I'm like, good lord, that sounds so time consuming. And also, I don't know, like, because to me it tends to be like in the moment whenever you have like a voiceover, it's like that is when you think of what the correct clip is, not in the writing phase. But that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, unless it's in the LFTS scripts, unless it's an actual clip that's like being called out, that's going to have like the script alongside it on screen. We don't decide what the B-roll is until we're in the edit.
Yeah. I mean, we do that sometimes where it'll be like I will be referring to a thing and I need to notate what the thing is, but other than that, we don't generally do that.
Yeah, I mean it's impressive even just hearing that it the only 2 weeks for the manufacturing authenticity because they're like a full episode. They're a half hour or more sometimes. They're very in depth, but they're very enjoyable.
Well, that one was made in a fugue of panic because I got some. I was just like having a really hard time that when we actually did the shoot where I'm like in the black and white stuff and the academic, that was a bad day for unrelated reasons. But whenever I got there, like I didn't realize that the studio I had rented was a photo studio, was not designed for sound. And on top of that, the DP I hired did not clean the lens. And even though I gave him the lens and said, "This is dirty, please clean it," I said it with my words. And like the teleprompter wasn't working, and like the makeup artist I was not terribly thrilled with. And so a lot of the footage was out of focus, so it looked like soft focus. So like as I the next following Monday, as we were having like our weekly meeting, I was just like, I don't know what to do because like the like sort of academic backdrop was originally supposed to be like sort of like a Crash Course style parody. It was supposed to look really crisp. And Angie, my co-writer, she also my co-editor, was like, "Well, we just got these Red Giant filters. I'm gonna play with this." And then she like a few days later was like, "Okay, I think I figured it out. There's this music I found on Epidemic Sound that's like 90s Casio keyboard music." And so that was like sort of the very embodiment of saved in the edit because the Hank stuff was what we filmed first, or what I filmed first was this because I wanted there to be like different layers of authenticity, like stuff that felt really natural and stuff that felt really constructed, and sort of like going back and forth between these levels of like my normal setup, which is sort of like mid-level constructed, and then the conversation with Hank, which is intended to be like the least constructed feeling, and then you have like the Sylvia Plath backdrop, which is like the most constructed. But that was very, very saved in the edit because but like thank God we had those filters, because if it didn't, because I was also supposed to premiere that in front of an audience.
Oh really? Yeah. What was the audience?
XOXO Festival up in Portland. It was it's like 1,000 people, which I'd never done before. Wow. Yeah. So that was part of why I was like, because I had the fugue state of like actually like getting the things in order and making it make sense, because we worked harder on that one than we have I did probably any of them, just in terms of the edit, to say nothing of the writing.
I mean, I was going to say, just hearing that the intentionality you put into different levels of construction in the actual video you're making. I watched your Hobbit videos first, as I imagine a lot of people get into you through the Hobbit trilogy. Your trilogy.
Yeah, my trilogy.
Yeah, and,
part 2 of 3.
And that what blew me away about them was that you kind of come expecting like a good Hobbit takedown, but the amount of effort and thoughtfulness and how epic it gets, and you literally go to New Zealand and it just keeps getting bigger and more complex but always enjoyable. I think your channel is very unique in that way. I don't know of many other channels that have that epic yet very like intelligent, critical quality. So yeah, whatever you're doing, it's really unique and interesting.
Yeah, I think the thing is we try not to get, because I think it's really easy on YouTube, because YouTube rewards homogeneity, and
Right.
it's really easy to fall into that, and I don't, I just
Yeah.
I couldn't do it if we if it did kind of fall into like the same thing every time. So I think it's important to stay interested by keeping experimenting.
Well, and your videos are engaging with film on a meta level. And so for your channel to also operate somewhat on a meta level is kind of the only thing that makes sense, I think it is really unique, as Alex pointed out just now, but also really smart, because the people who are watching and learning from you are also thinking about all of these things that you are specifically then addressing. So like in that video about manufacturing authenticity, that is something, a conversation about that is probably sort of inherently already happening among people that watch your channel, about like, how real is any of this? How real is YouTube? It's not real at all. We sort of understand that conversation is already going on. And so then by, directly addressing it and inserting like your voice into that conversation that you're already a part of is what is really effective.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that like one of the things that I'm drawn to about film criticism is getting to engage film on that level, which is not something that our channel really does.
Well, I think it's also like, it
yeah.
depends on if the channel is like personality driven
Exactly.
or idea driven, which I think is more yours. Because I think I didn't intend for that to be the way my channel was going to go. It just kind of ended up that way because, again, what YouTube rewards is like, sort of a name and a brand and a personality. And it is odd. Like the bigger your reach gets, the more you kind of think of yourselves in terms of like, there's two yous. There's the you that you live, and then there's the you that you show on like Twitter and YouTube. And I just got an Instagram, and I'm like, I gotta figure out how to use that.
So
and,
many platforms,
just like, and just like even like on Twitter, like, thinking like, oh, should I capitalize the letters in this tweet? Or, just the fact that my, avatar is John Turturro getting peed on. It's just like these are all little signifiers. And it's like there's a genuineness to it, but it is at the end of the day, like packaging.
Yeah, decisions are being made.
Constructed.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize they do it.
Yeah. Well, as someone just appears at the very end of my videos, that was very stressful at the beginning. And just, figuring out what is the personality that I'm putting forward.
Guys.
And
he's like,
good guy, Michael.
Yeah. Should we give the audience a name? Like, Low Gang.
Right. I remember like spending too much
listeners
hearing that piece of advice at VidCon of like, like you should have like a nickname for your audience. Like, hey, Vsauce. Like Vsauce is like the name of my audience. And so like
that'll be a yikes from me, dog.
Yeah. It's like
one yikes.
Spent 5 minutes like lessons from the screenplay
screeners.
I don't like any of this. Yeah. So that video just really, spoke to me as someone that operates on YouTube. And
it's kind of insidious because it is encouraging like the sort of parasocial relationship where it's like whenever you name your audience and the audience identifies, especially young people, because I think that's why like our audience skews older, so it doesn't really work in the same way that it would for like Low Gang or I don't think How to Cake It does have I don't think she has a like Hey Cakers. which is surprising because she has so many like community things and website things and sign up for this special thing, but they don't have I thing. I honestly find channels that do that kind of unbearable. Like one of my favorite
very
channels is
exhausting.
Ask a Mortician, and she quit doing that. I'm like, thank
Mhm.
God. They used to be deathlings.
Okay. Awesome. Cool. Well, so before we wrap up, why don't we go around and talk about what we've all been watching this last week? Trisha, would you like to go first?
Sure, I would love to. Actually, yesterday, so if you guys haven't seen Cold War, which came
I
out,
really want to.
oh my gosh, it's beautiful. So I wrote down the name and how I'm supposed to say it. Paweł Pawlikowski. I'm gonna stay with that.
Cool.
He's a Polish filmmaker. He directed Cold War, which was nominated for several Oscars. We're here in March in 2019. We just got through the Oscar ceremony, and one of the biggest surprises is that this filmmaker was nominated for Best Director, which is astounding. It doesn't happen very much in the Academy Awards. So Cold War is absolutely gorgeous. It's black and white. If you haven't seen it, absolutely check it out. It's really beautifully done. As many people have said, it is an epic love story, but it's only like 97 minutes long, and it feels the scale of it. It's just enormous, and it's music, and it's gorgeous. And so I went back and I watched one of his earlier movies last night called My Summer of Love from 2004. And it stars very young Emily Blunt.
Oh, I've heard of this movie.
Yeah. Pre Devil Wears Prada, and it's a lovely little movie. I mean, it's not perfect or anything, but it's a really sweet little character study. It's a good like coming of age sort of for these like young girls in England in the summer, and they're bored and all that kind of stuff. So My Summer of Love, you can check it out. It's on your Hoopla app. Which you probably, hopefully
That's
you
like for
have.
public libraries, right?
It is the public library
Yeah.
app.
Use it all the
that's
time.
on your Plex, so you can check it out on your Hoopla.
Nice.
Awesome. Cool. Alex?
It's funny. I think earlier in this podcast, Lindsay mentioned Mad Max Fury Road, and I just got it on 4K Blu-ray.
I keep meaning to get. Every time I go to
And-
Best Buy, it's not there.
Mhm.
It looks so good in 4K, HDR, everything.
Yeah, I need to
Um,
get in on that.
And yeah, it's been chatted about amongst this group a little bit. Like on our Slack channel, I feel like half
Mhm.
of the LFTS team is kind of like, oh yeah, overrated, whatever.
Excuse me?
What?
No, not from over
All right,
here.
I'm
I
like,
know. I'm saying,
bye.
but
Thank
our
you.
but our side over here, me and Trisha, she was like, I think it's excellent. And I'm
Yeah,
You
like,
don't like
yeah.
E.T. and think Mad Max is over.
Good.
Sorry,
Yes,
sorry to
give
argue
him
my
shit.
point.
I don't. I would say I don't think it's overrated. I would.
Canceled.
Well, actually, overrated is probably fine. It's not.
Canceled.
It's not a favorite of mine.
Canceled.
Anyway, I don't know. I maybe need to see it again. I don't. Maybe you've seen it twice already. But anyway, I just watching it again. I was just so. I know, just seeing it in the right format, really loud on
Mhm.
my surround sound, with the beautiful like Dolby Vision version. It's just pure cinematic joy for me. And especially, I think when I saw it like in theaters, maybe I was a little tired or something, but like by the finale, I was a little fatigued. And so I remember like the first half just being so amazing and being a little fatigued by the end. But this time around, I was not fatigued, and the finale does everything you want. Like it just everything happens, and it all gets to the worst place, and Charlize Theron is stabbed, and like it just does that operatic everything you want from this movie thing.
Yeah.
And when a movie does that for me, I'm just so happy.
I felt the same way the first time I saw it. Like, and I think I saw it like 6 times in theaters.
Right.
Because like it definitely is like it improves on rewatch because like you feel less fatigued, so you're able to appreciate.
Yeah,
it.
I was literally just, I think, just worn out by the time it got to the finale car chase. The first couple times I saw it, but this time I just appreciated it for what it was, and it's almost like it's better to watch in isolation, just like that final scene.
Maybe I should watch, because I think I saw it in the Chinese theater also, so it was like really loud and
yeah.
just like it was a very uncomfortable
3D,
experience.
yeah.
So I'll have to watch it.
Maybe we just like watch like a scene or two in isolation,
Yeah.
just for the cinematic study of it.
Sure. Okay, so really quick, I'll say that I finally recently saw Into the Spider-Verse, which was lovely and lots
Yay!
of fun and visually just amazing to look at. Like whatever that animation style that they arrived at is just something feels really unique and fresh and just enhanced the experience of it so much. So Lindsay, what have you been watching?
Well, I just watched the 2-part HBO documentary Leaving Neverland, which is, of course, about graphic child molestation by one Mr. Michael Jackson. It is about an hour too long. It's because it's mostly interviews, but it paints a really kind of damning. It's just sort of like it's like coming out. It's like, man, I can't imagine what you know. But it's also kind of like making a documentary about vaccines and why they're good. It's kind of like when you go in believing what you believe, like unless you're on the fence, it's not going to change anyone's mind because people think what they think about Michael Jackson. But I don't know. It was also sort of it really kind of drove home to me, just sort of like in this, era of like Me Too and, believing victims, just particularly how children tend not to be believed, and especially like arguably even more than women, because it's really easy to create and reinforce this narrative of like, oh, well, they were, coerced or brainwashed. And in the case of Michael Jackson, it's like, but that many though? It's like weird. There's like a deep state, conspiracy against him. But people believe that. So I don't know. It's like if you can handle it's because it really, really, really graphic descriptions. So if you're not here for like if that's too much, because that like basically it's these two grown men looking back on what their experience was, and it gets really, really graphic. So it's like, do bear that in mind, content warning, but it's definitely worth checking out. But with that very large caveat.
Yeah. And then maybe watch Spider-Verse after to cheer up or something.
Watch Independence Day.
Yeah.
Do you remember the 90s back when everyone was like, oh, Michael Jackson's fine.
Right. It's all fine.
Everything was fine back then.
Yeah, he didn't have a childhood. It's very sad.
Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you online?
You can find me at the Lindsay Ellis on Twitter. That's Lindsay with an A. And my YouTube channel is also just my name because I couldn't think of a better one.
It's a good way to go. So links to Lindsay's channel and several of her videos will be in the show notes. Really, really check them out. They're amazing. They're so great. Thank you so much.
We're all big fans.
No, thank you.
Yay.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Hey guys, Michael here. I just want to say thanks again to Lindsay Ellis for coming on the show. We had so much fun chatting with her. And thank you to all of you guys who have subscribed and listened and left all the amazing reviews on iTunes. Make sure to subscribe to Beyond the Screenplay wherever you get your podcasts. We love hearing feedback, so feel free to hit us up and share any thoughts you have. All of our Twitter handles are in the show notes. And finally, if you want to help us continue to grow both the channel and the podcast, head to the Patreon for Lessons from the Screenplay to become a patron. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.